morning, everyone. We are providing an update on where we are here in August with respect to the unprecedented increase in shootings that we've had, and the unacceptable number of shootings that we've had in the city of Albany. And so we wanted to clarify where we are, what the department has been doing, and then the chief is going to be speaking to the partnerships that we have and what he is seeing and what we need from our residents and from our community as we move forward. So, you know, we talk about a lot of different numbers, including the number of victims. We've had 175 shots fired. Those are calls for shots fired that have been confirmed in the city. When we talk about shootings, we're talking about shootings where an individual is actually shot, so that there is a victim that is actually incurs an injury from a shooting. And of those 69 shootings, we've had 92 shooting victims, and 7 of those victims have been homicides. And when we look at where this is happening in the city of Albany, this map shows where all of the shots and shootings and shots fired calls have come in the city of Albany. And you can see that in West Hill, in Arbor Hill, and we've had a number of incidents, as we know, in North Albany, on Jennings Drive and up on New Hope Terrace. And you will also see these are the calls for service. So over this same time period, these are the places, and you can see that it really correlates with where shots are fired, where our police department is being called for service. And what that means and why this is important is that when there are calls for service, that means there are police in these areas. And so this is where our calls for service are concentrated, and that is where our police units are deployed, responding to these calls and also on patrol, because these are the areas that are resulting in the most calls for service. So our average response time for a shots fired is, this is an indication that are in of for those who were wondering where the police were and asked this question, the police were the first to arrive on the scene before we even received a call. When we look at arrests, we're getting asked a lot about what's happening. Are you making any these incidents and clearing these incidents? Of the shots fired and shooting arrests, 29 of those incidents have been cleared by arrest. We've had 10 people who accounted for 15 of those incidents, who are currently incarcerated. And you know what the police will tell you is oftentimes we may be able to connect them to 2 or 3 shootings, but in all likelihood they may have been involved in more than 2 or 3. This is what we can connect them to with the evidence that the police have. 14 individuals who have been arrested for shots fired or shooting incidents are not currently incarcerated. So we arrested them, and they are not incarcerated at this time. And this speaks to what I talk about, which is that this is a criminal justice system. The police are only one part of that system. So We have officers and detectives who are working tirelessly, making arrests and doing all that they can to ensure that we are keeping the public safe. We've made 58 arrests around guns. So this includes, for example, a vehicle that may have been pulled over where a gun was found, a search warrant that may have been executed where a gun was found in an apartment, a person who may have been stopped and then they were carrying a gun. So we've made 58 total gun arrests. Of that, 13 of those individuals are currently incarcerated. And of those who were, not to confuse you, but we've had gun arrests and shots fired. So an individual shot a gun that actually hit someone, and they had a gun on them when we arrested them. So 10 individuals have been arrested for both a gun arrest and shots fired. 6 of these individuals are currently not incarcerated. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chief to talk about strategies and what else the department is doing to address these issues.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So what we saw was right around March of this year, we started to see an increase in activity. And it coincided with some of the things that we were seeing with COVID, and it escalated right around the time we had civil unrest. So in March of this year, slight increase in activity. During May and June, a significant increase in activity, and then we started to see it subside in July, and even going into August, we're starting to see some substantial decreases in activity. But it was very startling, and it was shocking to us. It was something that we were seeing in communities across the country. A lot of urban areas were experiencing the same thing, and so we had to regroup, and we had to find out how we could safely police our community, because at that period of time, we were dealing with safely interacting with our community because of COVID, so that we would not infect our residents, and our residents would not infect our officers. And then we had, right on the heels of that, civil unrest that changed the dynamic between police and the community as well. So we had just this shocking sequence of events that really shook law enforcement to the core. And now we're starting to regroup. And we have seen some very, very unsettling things in our community. And the mayor talked about the numbers and talked about how high, our shooting incidents are just unacceptable. But the message that I want to send is that we are seeing a tremendous amount of progress in addressing these issues in our community. When you look at where we were a year ago and you compare that period of time with the period of time that we're in right now, we're actually seeing decreases in violent crime and overall crime in our community for the 30-day period that we're in now compared to the 30-day period of last year. When you look at the normal rate of activity in our community, even when we're not dealing with COVID or civil unrest, what you typically see is an increase in activity in May and June and July, and then it starts to subside as we get into August and September. We're actually seeing the opposite. In July of this year, when we typically see an increase in activity on normal years, we actually saw a decrease in activity this year. So what this is all telling me when we're digging into these numbers is that we're actually trending back down in terms of activity in this community. Now, when I say that, I also acknowledge that any violent crime in this community is one violent crime too many. And we're not minimizing at all the impact that these violent crimes are having on people in our community. But I think when we're talking about some of these things, it's important that we also send the message to our community what type of progress is being made. And a substantial amount of progress is being made. And part of that is we're having so many partnerships during this period of time. We have faith-based organizations who are working with us, community groups, individuals who reside in this community who just want to help, right? I get calls almost every day from some of those folks. We have our law enforcement partners like the Albany County Sheriff's Department and the State Police, who have offered and have allowed some of their troopers and deputies to work with us to increase our police presence in our neighborhoods. And our officers in this department have just done a phenomenal job. During this period of time when we had to be extremely careful about how we policed our communities so that there would not be a perception of over-policing. And during incredibly tense periods of time, we had to be very careful about how we interacted with our community. Our officers were out there still making arrests. They were still doing these things in a constitutional, fair, and unbiased way. We've made well over half dozen arrests of violent individuals in this community who are, like the mayor said, were responsible for several incidents of violence in our city. Those things have, in combination with these partnerships with our community and our other law enforcement partners, have helped to calm things in our community and help us continue with this downward trend in activity. And so as we're moving forward, we're opening up again. We will be more active in the community. During the period when we were going through COVID and some of these other things, we were doing a lot of investigations that were leading us to suspects and allowing us to do some of these things. Now we'll be doing more of that. We'll be doing more visible things out in our community. Our community has seen more police presence on our streets. And we're going to continue doing what we've been doing, and that is sending a message to individuals who commit criminal acts in this community that we will find out who they are, we will arrest them, and we will prosecute them. And we have a very, very strong record with that, and we'll continue with that piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And so, we continue to look at each of these shootings and really seek to get to the root causes of those shootings. There was a shooting response last night that was attended by dozens of people from the community. There are violence interrupters who can help to mediate disputes. But the bottom line is that we deserve to have communities that are safe. Every street in this city deserves to be safe. And anyone who picks up a gun and fires it in this community is a menace to this community. And this police department must be able to move forward and make arrests and protect all of the residents of this city. And we are grateful for the community organizations and the community leaders who are recognizing and understanding that this is a multifaceted issue, a multifaceted problem. And I also believe that we could have not one more. Not one more. It is within our power, not the police department's power, right? It's not just the police department's job to keep us safe. We have to come together as a community and demand not one more shooting. Not one more. There are too many resources out there, too many people who care, too many people who are leading in our community and in our neighborhood for us to not be able to reach people who are engaging in these activities and working to resolve these disputes in a way that does not involve gun violence. And so we look forward to the continued work of this police department in investigating and bringing to justice the people who have ripped apart people's lives with bullets. And we will also continue to do all we can in partnering with the community to keep the community safe. The community can reach out in many ways. They can reach out in ways that are anonymous. But we need to work together in order to keep our neighborhoods safe. And I can't end without my final pitch. This comes down to Albany Counts, right? Responding to the census has never been more important. And it's very simple. People can shout at me and scream at me and complain about lack of resource. And we can have that conversation when we have resource to give out. And we don't get that resource if people don't get counted. So when we talk about the need for more resource in these neighborhoods, It's so important to understand that all of that resource starts with the census. The federal government decides how much money DSS gets based on the census. The federal government decides how much money we get for our parks and our infrastructure based on the census. We want a community center, people need to be counted. We want a grocery store, people need to be counted. We want jobs programs, people need to be counted. We want seats for pre-K, people need to be counted. So one of the things that I have been encouraged by is that with all of the activism that we're seeing in the community, there are people who are making this connection. And I look forward to having robust debates about what we are going to do with the resources that we get when everyone is counted. And so this is the most critical thing that people can do. If we want to change the trajectory of these neighborhoods, if we want to change the trajectory that we are on right now, it starts with being counted. It starts with knowing who is in our neighborhoods and fighting for the resources that our neighborhoods need in order to be able to create safe and livable neighborhoods that everyone in our community can be proud of. With that, we'll open it up to questions.
Mayor, speaking of neighborhoods, I spent some time yesterday in the Westville neighborhood and talked to business owners there. They said they want to see more of you and the city council, not necessarily police, but elected officials walking the streets there, talking to neighbors. Are you doing that?
You know, I was there last night. I was there in the afternoon for an event that was happening at First and Quail. And you know, when I became mayor, one of the things that I talked about and one of the things that I did was literally walk the streets of our neighborhoods, particularly West Hill. West Hill was probably one of the most underinvested neighborhoods in this city. It was. And you know, what shocked me about it was that I walked down streets where concrete sidewalks had been ripped up for whatever reason and then replaced with asphalt. I talked to moms who said, I go through a stroller every 6 months because this asphalt rips up the wheels of my stroller. It was hot, right? That black asphalt, just reflecting the heat. There were empty tree beds. And so, you know, we can talk about the blight that we see in these neighborhoods and garbage, right? The city doesn't throw garbage on the street. The city isn't, we don't own those buildings with the red X's on them. But what we do own are the streets and the sidewalks. And I made a commitment then that we were going to fix every single one of those asphalt sidewalks and replace them. And we've invested millions of dollars to do that. And, you know, I understand that then I have some people say, well, you know, that's just sidewalks, we need more. Yes, you need more. But we have to demonstrate with what we own and what the city is responsible for that we care about this neighborhood and that we are investing in this neighborhood. And I've taken all of my commissioners on those walks with me. And I look at it through the eyes of, if I lived here, right? If I lived here, what would I want? What message is the city sending me if my street is full of potholes and has asphalt sidewalks? And I took that on. As, you know, I didn't create it. You know, it's something that we inherited. But this year is the year that all of those asphalt sidewalks have now been replaced. And I know that that's not enough, but it's what we control, and it shows where we made those investments. Those are dollars that weren't spent in other neighborhoods in the city. Those were dollars that weren't spent to repave streets in neighborhoods that people in West Hill say get all the resources. Those were dollars that were spent in West Hill because we care about that community. And we want that to be a community that everyone who lives there can be proud of.
My question is for the chief. You said 13 of the shot fire calls officers were the first ones there, they're the ones who reported it to begin with. Even with officers there, these things are happening. What's being done to kind of look at, even when you have a presence there, still some of these violent acts happening?
Well, again, and you're right, the officers are there, and these things are still happening in certain instances. And sometimes they don't know that the officers are there. That's another element of this. You know, the officers are patrolling the neighborhoods, and they may be on another street over, and these individuals don't even know that they're there. And I think in most of the cases that was what was happening, and it allowed the officers to respond quickly. But it does tell you, though, how brazen some of these people involved in these activities are, and why it's so important that we take these individuals off the street. And again, you know, we're working very hard to do that. We've got a very good track record. We have some investigations that are still ongoing. So more will be identified, more will be arrested, because it's critical that these violent individuals who are committing these crimes in our neighborhoods are taken off the streets.
You said there were a number of arrests made where people were not sent to jail. What were the charges in those cases, and are any of those people who were arrested repeat offenders?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
You said there were a few, you talked about some arrests. You named a number of which were not incarcerated at this point. Are they back on to reoffending? And what were the charges that allowed them to walk and not go to jail for being involved?
See, I don't know the exact charges of those individuals, but there have been some individuals who have been arrested, and they either made bail and were released, and once they're out, they're awaiting trial. And we've had individuals who were out awaiting trial who committed other acts of violence. Individuals who should have been in jail. For example, the individual who committed the homicide down at Morgan and Pearl was a person that should have been in jail. And so we've had cases like that. Now, the police department is doing what we can. You know, we're arresting these individuals. They're appropriate charges. These are violent individuals in all cases. And once it gets into other parts of the criminal justice system, we don't have much influence at that point. But we'll continue doing what we have to do to get these young men and women off the street.
Chief, are you seeing these state laws and bail reform and raise the age hindering your department's ability to get these major people off the street?
You know, I need more data because, you know, we know anecdotally that it likely has some impact. You know, we hear the stories about individuals who have been arrested and they get out and they do certain things, and we hear the impact that it's having on other parts of our criminal justice system. So anecdotally, I think there's something there, but for me before I can make an official statement on that, I'd like to see more data come in, and we haven't had an opportunity to get that data in to totally examine it and see exactly what the impact is, exactly who has been arrested, and exactly what has happened with those individual persons once they progress throughout the system. And so I don't have that information yet.
Is that something that you would look into?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, we're tracking that information, and as we're getting these data points in, you know, we're connecting them and seeing if we can make some inferences from some of that data. It's just not enough in right now because the reform laws are so new, and I think we have to be careful about making any affirmative conclusions about what's happening until we really get some more data in and really see how these things are connected.
And if I could just add, I mean, I think that even looking at whatever that data is going to be tainted by COVID-19. So it's very, very difficult to track what is happening because the courts were closed, what is happening because we haven't had grand juries, and we do have a grand jury that's sitting now, but my understanding is it's moving very slowly because of COVID. They're only meeting for shorter periods of time. And so to say that the other parts of the criminal justice system have ground to a halt might be overstating it. They're coming back online, but it has been a challenge with respect to getting people arraigned and getting them adjudicated as to whether bail is going to be set. And then we also have to pull out, there have been at least one case that we're very aware of, because it involved an injury to one of our officers where the person was released. So bail could have been set, right? But it's up to the judge, right? So judges have a lot of discretion. So I think to the chief's point, unwrapping that is going to be something that we have to be very, very careful about. And the other piece of this is that other states have bail reform. Other states, we were actually one of only 2 states in the country that prosecuted 16 and 17-year-olds automatically as adults. One of only 2. So other states have figured this out. And so that's the other piece of this, is we have to be looking at the other parts of the criminal justice system to say, what are the changes that you're making in what you're doing in response to this? and the state provided millions of dollars for Raise the Age. And as we look at bail reform and as we look at what advocacy we may need, I think that the county should be advocating for pretrial services so that you're ensuring that you are able to monitor people who are out awaiting trial, and that you're ensuring that they're not engaging in conduct that could result in them having that privilege of being out awaiting trial revoked. So there are a lot of pieces to this, and you know, I'm troubled. I don't know why so many of those individuals are not incarcerated. I don't know. I don't know what's happening with their trials. You know, again, we're one piece of this criminal justice system. And I know that our police department would like nothing more than to have these cases go to trial so that we can ensure that we're keeping our streets safe.
And then a question for the chief. Regarding First Oil, I know last year one of the church leaders had sat down and showed you how dangerous the area is, and just had that recent shooting of the casino. I guess just talk to me a little bit about that, how you guys have prevented that, or something there.
Yeah, and so I think we've had to be very careful when we have incidents like this of having the blame game, pointing fingers and saying that somebody's at fault for things like this, because that's usually not the case. You know, we have hard-working people. You know, we're working in collaborations with a whole lot of other people, and it's just not fair to assign blame when you have a situation like this. But the facts of the matter are, yes, we've met with some of the folks in that community. We've met with Pastor Charlie, and we talked about some things that we can do in that community. And in fact, we've had increased police presence in that area. We've had stationary posts of officers several times in that area. We've made arrests in that area. In fact, the shooting that we had just most recently there, if you look at that video of the shooting itself, that was released, 5 or 10 minutes prior to the shooting, officers were seen riding through the neighborhood, and that's just one example. And I think one very compelling piece of this, when there's this narrative out there that the police are not around and the police are not responding fast enough, is to look at our response times. I mean, for those shootings that we've had, we are responding within 1 and 2 minutes. In most places across the country, for response times for violent crimes, they're happy with 3 to 5 minutes. You know, so within 120 seconds, officers are on scene, and in many cases, just like it was brought up, they're there even before the calls come in. In even other cases, the officers actually witnessed the acts of violence. And so, you know, I think we really have to get past this narrative that the police department is not there, we're not listening, because that's totally not the case. And it's very, very unfair to those officers who are out there patrolling these neighborhoods on a daily basis, and they're actually in the hot spots that we have. And they're really making a difference. Now, can we prevent every act of violence in a community? I mean, I think that's unreasonable. Can we be there, and can we send a message when these acts occur and identify who these individuals are and prosecute these individuals as a deterrent? Absolutely we can, and that's what we're working on. But the officers are there. The officers are patrolling these neighborhoods. There's a presence in these neighborhoods. There's some things that we can do, of course, to improve upon what we're doing, but the effort is there.
For the mayor, Allie B said yesterday that she deeply appreciated your presence at her event at First and Quail, and said that you not only had listened, but you gave her some sort of guidance moving forward. Overall, what did you learn at the event, and events like that can be implemented into your, I guess, governing strategy? Well,
you know, it's about access to information. You know, there are so many resources that are available, and you know, there's never enough, but we have so many resources that are available, and there is still a gap between awareness of those resources and access to those resources. You know, that's why when we had funding that was available through the CARES Act, that was community money that could be used around COVID, we had an initial application process, and we still had $350,000 that had not been programmed because we didn't have enough applications. And so we took it to the next level, and we did a Facebook Live webinar, and you can see it online, we recorded it, where we actually walked through how to fill out the application. Because we make assumptions, right? And some of these community-based organizations are really small. It might be one person or two people, and they get intimidated by this process. And so we want to demystify it. We want to make it as easy as we can. And so, you know, I'm constantly, when I'm asked about things in the community, I'm constantly challenged by that response of, I didn't know that. I didn't know that I could access that. I didn't know how to reach out to the land bank. I didn't know that this program existed. I didn't know that at the boxing gym you also do homework help. You know, all of these things that we really work hard to get out there in the community, that there still is this gap. And so that is a challenge to me, it's a challenge to my administration, that we have to do better. And that we have to make sure that we are communicating. One of the things at the gun response last night was there was a group that was there handing out flyers for a job fair. You know, so, you know, people might not realize it, but right now we're desperate for employees, desperate. We need laborers in our Department of General Services. And so there are people who say to me there are no jobs, and I'm like, can you come down to City Hall because or go down to DGS or go online, we need you. And so it's that gap between what's available, what services are here, where there are opportunities, and what the community sees and knows. And that's not surprising, right? Because if you're in a community and what you see are buildings with red X's and landlords who aren't taking care of their properties, you know, it's kind of hard to break through that and to see what opportunities are there. So I would say that, you know, when I go out, that is always the challenge that I have, that I ask myself, how can we do more, how can we do better to get information into the community about the resources that are available?
The centerpiece yesterday was actually what was an empty lot, but there was some fresh grass there, there is now a shed there, and it was kind of like, this is what we need. But in your opinion, is that a veneer of an improved neighborhood, or is that in itself substantive change?
I think it's substantive change. I mean, you have to show what's possible in order for people to really look at that and say, I can do this, right? We have funding that is available for anyone who wants to purchase a vacant lot, which they can purchase from the land bank for $100. And so if they want to turn it into a community garden, if they want to turn it into play space for kids that are on the block, you know, we stand ready and have funding and resource available to help make that happen. There are a lot of things that are happening organically in this neighborhood. In West Hill, there's a huge space that is being used for a victory garden. And we are working with the people who are running that, as well as others who are identifying needs in the community for space. And we're looking at what can we do to help make that happen and facilitate that happening. Not the city coming in and saying, we are going to do this on this lot. It's the community saying to us, this is our vision, how can you help us? And that's what being out in the community and talking to neighbors is all about. The space that is there now is a space where that can happen. It's in that neighborhood. Nobody has to come to City Hall. Nobody has to go to a common council meeting. We can go there and meet with community and be with community and learn from the community what they want.
We've got time for one more.
Chief, we've talked about this before. You mentioned that the common thread in some of these shootings are feuds, social media meets. As you made arrests, as you increase your made progress in these investigations, are there other themes that you guys are coming upon, other avenues that are driving some of these back and forth shootings we're seeing?
Yeah, right now it's exactly what you'd mentioned. A lot of it is social media, but more so we're having these feuds between these groups of individuals. And sometimes it's difficult to determine what the source of it is. You know, sometimes what we've learned in some of the investigations is that the source was something that happened 5 or 10 years ago. Or it involved a relative or a friend of the two who were directly involved. And a lot of it just doesn't make sense when you think about it. But but that's what's driving a lot of these feuds that we're seeing. It's just it just really doesn't make sense. And so my message has consistently been to our young men and our young women that we have got to resolve these conflicts in a more peaceful, nonviolent way. The disrespect and some of the feuds that happened years and years ago are not a reason to take out a gun and try to kill another person. And we've got to drill this into our young men and women. And fortunately, I think that message is getting out there because there are a whole host of people in this community who are just very, very engaged right now at all levels, and they're talking about this. And, I've been having this plea for a few months now, and it's being answered. Because, like the event that the mayor attended yesterday, and there's some other things that I've been attending, people are telling me that they want to get involved, they understand the urgency of this, and they know that they can help. They can help with some of the issues that are driving some of the violence. And so I'm extremely optimistic as we move forward, going into the heat of our summer season.
One last clarification. You mentioned you guys were receiving help from the Albany County Sheriff's Office and State Police.
Yes.
Is there an end date for that, or how long that's going to continue?
No end date at this point. It won't go on indefinitely, but I'm in constant contact with the sheriff and with the administration of the state police, and we're just trying to figure out when the right time is. And right now, it's just not. But again, it's not indefinite, and we're very appreciative of the help that they've offered.
Thank you,
Thank you.